presentation. With that, we'll unless there's anybody else here to speak, we'll open it up to the council to comment on the proposal. Chris, would you like to start? Sorry?
I can give the staff.
Oh, sorry. Can you tell I've been on vacation?
Not a problem. So I will just give a brief overview in addition. And this is kind of a sort of two-pronged application. There's the CSM element for the land division. There will be a subsequent zoning permit application for the new uses, the construction, which is scheduled for the next meeting, second meeting here in August. So this application will need to go through Plan Commission, Public Works Committee, as well as potentially City Council, pending a recommendation from the Plan Commission. It's scheduled for the September 1st Public Works Committee meeting. As with the other CSMs that we have recently reviewed, this post-pre-hearing will go to Viabeca for engineering review of the formal submittal. So the subject property was a part of the River Place plat and has not been subdivided. As mentioned, there's an existing 30-foot joint driveway easement in place across lots 1 and 2, as well as with the adjacent parcel to the west. I've been in discussion with the applicant as to how the future subdivision of this impacts that, and that's something. There's a couple draft reciprocal access agreements here that are have been circulated, but they will be formalized in conjunction with the formal application itself. As was mentioned, 2 lots, roughly 0.6 of an acre and 0.41 of an acre. There are no specific lot sizes required within this zoning district, but they should be sufficient to meet future development as was already outlined by the applicant. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize again.
No problem.
Okay. With that, I will start. Chris, would you like to start?
Sure. I know we're just looking at a CSM tonight, but part of our charge is to make sure it meets our standards, including stormwater management, green space parking, all the requirements per code. And since this is on what I'd say a critical corner for us, it's on the premier corner for River Place, and River Place had a whole set of, I won't call them restrictions, but standards on how things should be built. So number one, and you're a civil, so you'll get this,
Okay.
how are you planning on handling your stormwater quality? Because standards have changed a lot since this was built.
Okay.
And the reason I ask is you've got some pretty tight sites, in fact, talk about it in a little bit, but they're actually not even hitting our minimum standards for green space. So what are your thoughts for stormwater?
We were anticipating to actually have a bioretention facility on the south side of the site, pretty much very close to where the existing, like more of a, rain garden that's located on the south side and maybe on the east side. Just depends on how our drainage is going to work out. We haven't got through a lot of gradings yet, but we're anticipating to maintain the same existing drainage divide that's currently is, and then provide water quality by some sort of, bioretention facility.
Because I worry looking at that you don't have enough green space left to build that.
That's a very valid question. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Because standards have certainly changed in Dane County since this happened. So
Okay.
it's one thing I would say you want to look at.
Yes.
The lots are full. The one that I'm looking at particularly is the proposed medical clinic. And again, I know this is a conceptual, but it would be nice when the final comes in to at least have something that can show us where that corner of the building is. I'm a little worried about being in a vision triangle coming out onto Monona Drive right there where it hits. So I think it'd be handy. When I was there earlier today, there's a fence post that could be a property line, but I don't think it is because a lot of the landscaping was behind it.
Sure.
So it's just hard to tell, but it would be nice to know where those are, because what you're proposing is a fairly small lot, and we certainly, if everything else is met, we could go ahead and we could approve a CSM, but you're going to want to know that you have some reasonable ability to build something on it. So I think it makes it worthwhile to talk about what fits on there as we're looking at the CSM, at least so you understand where we're coming from.
Yes. Okay. Completely
Okay.
understandable.
So water quality be one. As far as construction, when it comes, it has nothing to do with CSM, but there's a set of standards for there. You can see what it is. It's the slope shingles, roofs with dormers and all that.
Yes.
That's a style for River Place, which is right
More
there.
of
You're right on the corner of that.
Yes.
There's Shepherd's Crook lights. You have them in your parking lot right now that match all the other Shepherd's Crook lights around there.
Yes.
Things like that. Green space. Your proposed medical clinic is below our minimum. You're at 25%, and we look for a minimum of 30.
Correct. Okay.
We have been known to grant some exceptions with some extraordinary landscaping, but that would certainly mean something substantially above minimum standards. I think we look for something above minimum standards on this corner anyway because it's so prominent.
Sure.
And some things we've done in the past have included intensifying landscaping. Perhaps you do something with a patio or decorative fences or things like that, patios. But that's something else to look at because you've got it pretty full.
Yes.
You've got a little more full than we normally would see. I think what you're showing for a conceptual for the restaurant, I believe it has enough queuing. I think it's well set up for that. I think basically you're going to be queuing in your own parking lot. The one thing I'm looking at though is the crosshatched area where once you're in the drive-through queuing where you don't have curb and gutter. It looks like you have a bump out or jump out there. We normally have a pass-through lane, which you don't have on here, but I'm a little worried with that people try to come in and short circuit and try to make a U-turn there and just mess up the traffic. So I'm not sure what your thought was why you don't have the curb and gutter all the way through there.
That was basically our bypass area as well, correct?
Well, I think it's something we at least have to look at. I'm not sure what would be the best solution there. Normally a full bypass lane, but if you don't have the room, you can see where I'm worried about people coming in that joint access driveway and just trying to make a U and cut in or something.
Right, that makes sense.
So
yes.
I would take a look at that. As far as the CSM itself goes, it's reasonable if we can see that we can fit something on these smaller lots. I think the restaurant seems to fit. I think the medical clinic is tight. I'd really like to see how that building impacts visibility coming out onto Monona Drive. So I think that would be helpful.
Yes,
when you
no, I
come back.
appreciate it. That's definitely great feedback.
And
as far as visibility, if I
I'm
may
sorry?
ask a question, as far as visibility, are you more concerned about the design of the building, more elevation, or versus like a
Traffic.
side triangle
Traffic, yeah. Vision
visibility?
triangle.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you.
let me back up.
For both.
That comment was about the vision triangle. I'm of course concerned about the look of the building.
The building,
design,
sure.
But,
Yes.
but we don't have that to look at. So
Okay.
it's close. It's 7.5 feet from the property line. What are you? 19, is that 12?
19.6.
19, so 20 feet off the property line. So it might be okay. It's going to seem tight. It's just hard to know where the property lines are right now, the way it sits. And I think that's it for me. As far as the CSM, no issues with the CSM as long as we can fit a viable product on it. We're not just creating something. Water quality would be by far and away the number one concern, that you can fit that adequately. You can always go underground, but that's expensive.
That is correct.
So
Yes.
there are other ways. They're permeable. I mean, there are other ways to do it. I just, especially on the medical clinic, I just don't see enough room where you can get a viable biobasin in there. But maybe you'll figure that out.
Okay. Nope. Very good comments.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Patrick?
I would echo Chris's comments and pretty much agree with those, but also add that I'm slightly concerned that the drive-through area is not large enough, because the way that I'm looking at the drive-through area, I just see cars backing up in the parking spaces and it being difficult for people to get in and out, especially during dinner time and, the Monona rush at 6 o'clock. So I would be a little concerned with the drive-through. And I guess, is this project viable without a drive-through?
I believe this particular site there basically would like to have that.
That would be a concern that I have
Yep.
on the traffic management on this parcel with that drive-through.
Okay. And the concern is for the car to basically back into where the perpendicular parking spaces are on the right side on the east side of the building, basically, correct?
Okay,
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, good, thank you.
that's all I have to add.
Great, thank you. Christine?
Yeah, I have a few of the same concerns. I was going to say with that drive-through, I know I've been in a situation where I've been in line and I had to get out. It was slow service and I just couldn't stay any longer. Kids were crying, and I had to scoot out, and it doesn't appear that there's an exit opportunity once you're in that line. And that could be even a safety concern. So I, like Chris said, having that bypass lane and making sure that's accessible to the cars that are in the line.
Yes.
Also, the proximity of the medical clinic, close to the intersection, that is really tight there. And then, do you have an idea of the type of restaurant this is?
This would be Chipotle, basically.
Oh, Chipotle,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
got it. Because I was going to say with, the green space, maybe they could do a rooftop garden. But I don't know if that's in Chipotle's brand.
Yeah.
But, something to make up for that, but maybe
Okay.
that's not an option.
Okay.
And yeah, I think other than that, I don't have any problems with the CSM other than it does create two really tight spaces, more of the medical clinic, and that I guess is a slight concern to me. I would ask, I was trying to figure out if the entrance and exit, if you're shifting that at all or changing that from what it is today.
We were proposing to basically maintain the exact
Okay.
driveway.
Okay, got it. That does seem adequate. I just wasn't quite clear if that was going to change or not. Yeah, I think otherwise I don't, those are my issues, and I think, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Susan?
Well, first I'll make a disclaimer, if it's necessary, that my husband owns the property next to it and shares the driveway, Fox and Fox.
Okay.
I don't believe there's a real conflict there, but I don't really have anything to add. The questions that have been asked are all the ones I would have asked. I guess the only one is, I think you said you don't have a client yet or a tenant yet for the medical clinic? That's
For the
just
southern, correct.
That's just a
Yeah.
concept you have.
It's just
So
a
does that
concept.
mean that might morph into something else, or? I mean, I guess I'm curious why you're committed to that particular concept.
The concept, we just thought that would be maybe the best, use for the southern piece. Is low traffic generating, and if somebody else, shows up that's interested in that, then we'll definitely communicate that with.
Okay, so maybe
With the
more of
staff.
like a physician who had a separate office or something?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
exactly. Very,
Okay.
low
That's all.
traffic generating.
Okay, great. Brian?
Yeah, all good questions. The one piece that I had a thought on regarding the north side of the north parcel, it looks like there's an entry and exit lane that goes all the way from River Place all the way in on the shared access to then be able to access the parking lot from that north side. I'm curious of why there wouldn't be the drive-through lane and then just a bypass lane out, but no in there, and force all the in traffic to come through the first entry point.
Okay.
And I only bring that up in the sense of it gives you a little bit more depth to play with regarding some of the safety concerns, potentially a different type of orientation of the building to help with queuing, spillover, especially on the backup. I know we normally talk about queuing as it relates to after people order, but I think we also have like the pre-order queuing lineup that I think people are fearful of that will end up in your parking lot. But those are pieces for you to kind of work through. Other than that, I think your thoughts on the division of two smaller lots and making sure that there is synergy between those two properties is going to be important. If you have a high generating property like a fast food restaurant with a drive-through, it really does limit what you can put on that southern parcel, and that will lock in for further use. But other than that, no concerns with with this part of the process, and look forward to future steps.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I would just add that I share people's concern about the parking drive-through bypass, and certainly Brian's made a good suggestion there, I think, and about As Patrick indicated, if that line is longer than the car that we're seeing there, it definitely backs up into the parking lot and is a problem.
Okay.
And then I would also echo what Chris said, not only about concerns about stormwater and about sightlines of the second building and stormwater overall, but I am concerned about the overall loss of green space here. That parcel is the last parcel of the four corners that has substantial green space right now. I believe more than we might even require by ordinance, and so to take it down to considerably less than what we would require, and to lose all that green space, I think would be a loss as well. So some concerns about that. But sorry. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Corrine, I can't see the Zoom very well. Corrine.
Okay, that's okay. I had a similar thought to what Brian had brought up, just looking at if someone came in off of River Place and went north to enter the site, like there's someone maybe already turning right at that first turn, they would go north, but they wanted to get into the drive-through, they can't really turn. The way you have it laid out on the site, they can't come in and turn very well if there's already a queue there. So I wonder if you think about shifting where your building is and putting the parking lot on the other side and having the drive-through on one side, and that would give you a little bit of space for that pass-through or pass-by. So I think you might want to think about that just a little bit more, how the flow would go and how you'd be able to communicate so that everyone would know if they wanted the drive-through, where would they go? Do you want them driving through the parking lot, or people are going to be backing out, pulling and backing out? I also had a question about the medical facility, and I know you said you're still looking into that, or you don't have someone, but I agree with those concerns as well. It needs to be a use that you'd be able to fit the parking for. Just, I guess, be very thoughtful about that. Okay. And then my other comment was about the connection to pedestrian access on the site. Mm-hmm. There are the different hotels in the area, and we all know Chipotle is going to bring a lot of traffic, and there is, I guess I just have concerns. I can see people who are staying at the hotel, either across the street or around the corner, and wanting to walk over and grab something to eat, but I don't see how they would really safely access this site. So as you're thinking about that in future after the CSM process, I guess I would just suggest thinking about how you would add that and what that would do, because that's also going to take, if you're putting in sidewalk or something, that's going to take away some of that green space as well. So I guess that was just the one thing that I noticed when I was looking at this. So that was it.
Terrific. Corrine, thank you.
Thank you.
Chris?
Just listening to all the comments, it really strikes me that all these could be solved without the CSM, and just putting your restaurant on the property the way it is right now, you could solve all these issues. You might be trying to just put too much on this property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could be a bigger Chipotle.
Yes.
The world's largest. Well, can I ask a question too?
Yes.
I was going to mention, since Corrine brought up the multimodal conversation, we do like to encourage a spot for bike parking as well. We have a lot of bikes that go through our community, so you might want to park that in. And then I know this is kind of getting ahead. It's always hard when we get the plans, right? I was just trying to figure out where the dumpster area will be in the site. I don't know if you've considered that.
We were thinking basically initially we were thinking to put the dumpster as you enter the shared access at the end of the drive, basically.
Okay.
But there is a 15 feet wide easement. There's a water line easement, and there's a 10 feet wide electric easement. So we couldn't put the dumpster Then so we basically replaced it on the east side of the property, and then we will do landscaping around it, so it's not visible. And also it's easily can be accessible by the, by the
Okay.
truck driver or dumpster.
I do want to mention, I know a naturopath clinic that is seeking a space. So if that's something you'll be interested in, I'd be happy to connect
Yes.
some dots for you.
That would be great. Thank you.
I just have just one other thought when Chris mentioned if you use the whole property for Chipotle, that would give you some outdoor seating space too, which right now, there's really no way I see that you could do that. So it's just all more to think about.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much for coming.
I appreciate
Appreciate
it. Thank
it.
you for all the feedback.
Feedback's
Thank you.
helpful. Okay, now let's move on to 6B, presentation by Steve Steinhoff of the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission regarding the 2050 Regional Development Framework. Welcome, Steve.
Doug, it turns out I don't have an HDMI. I don't know how it's been so long since I made a presentation. But I do have a thumb drive.
Okay.
So hopefully we can make that work.
Do you have your laptop?
If anybody can, will come.
Sure, you have another one? Oh, great. Yeah, let's just do that. Okay. Separate laptop.
Lisa saves the day again.
Leave it to the youth.
You're going to be taking notes the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
And I can share a copy of the presentation, including the notes too. So.
So, Christie, did I mention over?
Wait, what?
Over? Under over?
Oh, yeah,
Over.
yeah. Yeah.
So do you have a slide you're going through? You'll need to switch yourself. What's that? That you'll need to page through yourself? It would be. I think it's pages. Okay.
I can get this set up and then I can put a laptop there so I have HDMI.
Okay. Oh, I see. Maybe just open it. And actually, thumb drive and then.
You know what we might have to do? So that everybody can see it on Zoom, then you'll have to be on Zoom anyway. So. That'll work here. And we will.
On the, you hit plug in, I'm in the reading room.
Oh.
It is the applicant's.
Actually, as we think this through, you guys just went on Zoom with your computer. Because we're gonna have to take Zoom full screen anyway, so they can see your presentation.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. And then take over control.
That's right. That's right. You still do that. It's easier.
Yeah, if you want to share that with them, we can start here. I mean, we're already this far, if you don't mind using it.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
right.
6 if not years, that somebody needs to design the Find Your Glasses app as opposed to finding your phone or finding your keys.
Okay, I will change it up here so you guys can see it. And then your full screen.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
There we go.
All right. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm also bringing this up because I did have my notes I was going to read from on that. Okay.
Steve, if you could start by introducing yourself again, that would be great.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. My name is Steve Steinhoff, and I'm the agency director for the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission. And CARPC is responsible for maintaining a long-range regional plan for the Dane County region, and we're currently in the process of updating this plan, and it is called the Regional Development Framework. For those of you who are not familiar with CARPC, we are one of 9 regional planning commissions in Wisconsin. Local communities establish RPCs as vehicles to address issues that go beyond municipal boundaries. Our mission is and vision reflect that purpose. The mission to engage communities through planning, collaboration, and assistance, and our vision, a region where communities create exceptional quality of life for all by working together to solve regional challenges. The commission is governed by a 13-member body appointed by the Mayor of Madison, the Dane County Executive, Dane County Towns Association, and U.S. City of Monona is represented by the appointees by the Dane County Cities and Villages Association. We bring communities together to collaborate on land use and water quality plans, including the Regional Development Framework and the Dane County Water Quality Management Planning Program. That's a mouthful for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. We also conduct watershed and future urban development plans and provide planning, mapping, and data assistance to communities. We do not regulate land use, establish ordinances, issue permits, or conduct other types of regional planning. We do, however, partner with other regional entities to coordinate overall regional planning. So, now we're through with that. Now we're on to the Regional Development Framework itself, and we're interested to hear from you after the presentation. And here are some suggested questions for you to consider as you view the presentation for discussion afterwards. I realize this isn't necessarily set up as plan commissions aren't necessarily set up for a discussion type of format, but if we can get some feedback, that would be great. So questions to consider: how does the Regional Development Framework compare to your community's future development plan? And what do you think is the best way to implement the framework, both in your community and regionally, and what key challenges may exist? I realize I'm advancing the slides, sorry about that. Only on my, so. To kick off the presentation, we do have a short video, if I can get it to play. It's less than 2 minutes. It gives a broad overview of the framework's purpose and planning process. So there's no sound. I don't know.
That will be an issue.
Okay. If the video doesn't work, that's okay. We can move on.
We just needed to, let's just see what happens here. we needed to, when we shared it, we needed to share audio too, and I think we might have thought we would go right there.
Oh, right, uh-huh. Right, there you go. Mm-hmm. We'll probably need to
So what happens here,
go back a slide and then we can start over.
well, let's see if we go there.
Serves as a guide to tackle our common challenges and achieve our shared goals. The work to prepare this framework started about 5 years ago with the Greater Madison. Serves as a guide to tackle our common challenges and achieve our shared goals.
Beginning.
One of the Greater Madison region's key challenges is growth. With almost 200,000 more people projected to live in Dane County by the year 2050, our choices about how and where people live, work, and travel set the stage for future quality of life. CARPC's Regional Development Framework lays the necessary foundations to support continued growth by pinpointing opportunities and mapping realistic planning concepts that activate our greatest potential. It serves as a guide to tackle our common challenges and achieve our shared goals. The work to prepare this framework started about 5 years ago with the Greater Madison Vision Initiative that engaged people across the region to explore possible futures and set priorities. More than 9,000 people completed the Greater Madison Vision Survey. Their top priorities were climate change, access to opportunities, and conservation. Based upon those priorities and local inputs, we drafted a regional development framework to address the challenges of how we grow. The framework focuses growth in vibrant centers and corridors, prioritizes growth in already developed areas, plan areas for traditional neighborhoods and quality business development, and minimize growth in natural resource and farming areas. These strategies help us meet our climate, access to opportunity, and conservation goals. A resilient future starts with the decisions we make today. The Regional Development Framework serves as a guide for incorporating big-picture goals into individual decisions about where and how to grow. Please visit capitalareartpc.org to learn more, provide feedback, and request a presentation.
Okay, great. So that gives a real brief, high-level overview, and the rest of the presentation will flesh that out a little bit more. So as mentioned in the presentation and earlier, RPCs exist so communities can better address regional challenges, and the Regional Development Framework is one of the tools that we will employ to address regional challenges. As mentioned in the presentation, the philosophy behind the plan is that by working together, we can build a better region, a region that is stronger economically and with higher quality of life and natural and healthy natural and agricultural resources. As the video pointed out, one of the county's key challenges and opportunities is growth. Over the next 3 decades, we can expect about 200,000 more people in Dane County and about 100,000 more jobs. The video also mentioned that a Greater Madison vision, which I believe I presented to you earlier, a year or so ago, laid the groundwork for the framework. Almost 50 leaders from public and private sectors put their heads together to chart a course towards shared goals and vision and plan for future growth. Facilitated by CARPC, the initiative engaged groups and people across the region to explore possible futures and set priorities. AGMV involved extensive outreach and public involvement with more than 9,000 people who were broadly representative of the region, who completed a survey in late 2018 about possible futures and how we can best position the region to prepare for and respond to likely futures. One of the top public priorities identified by the survey was reducing greenhouse gases that cause climate change and to become more resilient to the effects of climate change that we're already experiencing in the form of higher flood risk. Another top priority was increasing access to jobs and services for all people, in particular as it relates to the physical growth and development by expanding housing choices and ensuring safe, affordable housing for all, and by creating a robust regional transit system for Madison and adjacent communities. And third was conserving our vital natural, agricultural, and fiscal resources. And by fiscal, that means tax dollars for infrastructure like roads and utilities. Using the information collected during the AGMV process, CARPC developed widely agreed upon goals and objectives for future growth and development. The Regional Development Framework is designed to help accomplish these goals. The framework will be an advisory guide for local communities, regional agencies, and private sector partners. It is a joint effort between CARPC and the Greater Madison MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which you may know is a regional transportation planning body with whom we work closely. And we're working with them on this project to integrate regional land use and transportation planning. To prepare the framework, we worked with local community officials to create a 2050 growth scenario that locates people, households, and jobs across the region to meet growth projections. It follows community plans, aims to achieve regional priorities and goals, and applies lessons learned from similar regional planning efforts across the country. From this input, we identified 6 growth strategies to achieve our shared goals. The first strategy is to focus growth in centers and corridors and along corridors. The framework defines centers as vibrant places where people can live, work, shop, be entertained, meet, and connect with others. They are welcoming places for all people, and they foster innovation. Corridors connect centers. They provide a variety of ways to travel, including walking, biking, and where possible, transit. They also offer, at least along some stretches, similar combinations of activities found in centers. Centers are found at a range of scales. The Metro Center serves as a government, business, and cultural center for the entire region. Of course, it's downtown Madison. Regional centers draw people from multiple communities within the region, and community centers draw people from across the community. This map shows where centers currently exist in the green circles and where they could exist with attention to planning and development in the blue circles. Here is the centers and corridors map zoomed in on the Monona area. You can see the existing center on Broadway, also shown in the Google Street View image, as well as planned centers in the Monona Drive corridor. The Regional Development Framework locates about 40% of all growth over the next 3 decades within centers and corridors. And concentrating growth in this manner accomplishes several things related to the regional development goals. One outcome is reducing greenhouse gas emissions by bringing people closer together to their desired destinations. This reduces car travel and associated emissions. Centers connected by transit corridors can further reduce car travel. Decreasing the distance between destinations can increase access to jobs, resources, and personal needs. Mixed housing types within centers and along corridors improves housing choice in the region and can reduce people's transportation utility costs through compact development. The second regional development strategy is to prioritize growth in already developed areas. A common example of future development in these developed areas is replacing aged strip malls with taller buildings for housing and businesses, like you see in many places happening around the region quite a bit. Gray areas on this map are already developed with urban uses today. Highlighted in pink are the areas where high concentrations of new development are planned to occur in the framework. This strategy complements the centers and corridors one because many centers and corridors are or will be inside already developed areas and therefore helps achieve many of the same goals. This strategy helps conserve taxpayer funds by making better use of existing infrastructure like roads and pipes. Like developing in centers and corridors, it reduces pressures to develop in farming and natural areas. Zooming in again to Monona area, it shows concentrations of planned urban development along Broadway and Monona Drive. Some of the pink areas that you see here, of course, are outside the city of Monona. A note that the pink areas show concentrations of future growth, but not all planned future growth in the framework. Smaller areas of growth that didn't meet our threshold for depicting the concentrated areas of growth didn't show up. We chose this strategy of showing mostly the areas of concentrated growth because at a regional scale it gets too difficult to see the overall picture. But when you zoom in, it gets a little fuzzy looking. The framework's projection forecasts 4 out of 10 new households and 1 out of 4 new jobs to occur within already developed areas. Of course, for the city of Monona, prioritizing development in already developed areas is pretty much your bailiwick, because that's what you do. So you're ahead of the game there. As the population grows, we're on to strategy 3, more good jobs and wealth-generating businesses are needed. Suitable sites are needed to accommodate this business growth. That's sort of what you were talking about the previous agenda item. The Regional Development Framework's third strategy is planning areas for such growth to occur. Certain industries concentrated in the greater Madison region offer higher wages, stronger career pathways, and import dollars from outside the region that support other industries. For example, information and communications technology, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and biotechnology. Areas illustrated on this map have high concentrations of office, industrial, and medical employment in our 2050 scenario. Again, zooming in your area, you can see those areas that have those concentrations in those sectors. WPS is probably the most important prominent employment district in Monona, although correct me if I'm wrong. The fourth strategy is to plan new residential areas according to the principles of traditional neighborhoods. Traditional neighborhoods include a mix of housing types, walkable streets, parks and civic spaces, and shopping and services. With careful planning, the areas illustrated on the map could achieve those results. These types of neighborhoods provide a wider range of housing options, provide walking and biking, transit in some cases. They're more compact than subdivisions that contain mostly single-family houses on large lots, thus reducing pressure to develop farmland and natural areas, and they can foster community through walkable streets and neighborhood parks. This strategy doesn't necessarily really apply to the city of Monona, because it's really more about smarter edge development on greenfield sites. If you're planning traditional neighborhoods, you typically need a large enough size to plan a whole neighborhood. And since you're all about infill and redevelopment here, this strategy is probably applies more to other communities. CARPC used a computer model to estimate outcomes of the 2050 growth scenario. The model estimates that if the 4 strategies covered so far are implemented, there would be a 9% reduction in average household transportation and utility costs, and a 7% reduction in average household CO2 emissions. The first 4 strategies focus on where to grow. The remaining 2 highlight where to minimize growth and why. Again, these strategies are mostly applied to communities that are growing outward into agricultural and natural areas, but I'll review them just to give you the overall regional picture. The 5th strategy is to protect natural resources by avoiding protected natural areas and enhancing what the Regional Development Framework calls stewardship areas. This map shows those resource protection and stewardship areas, and as well as the concentrated areas of development. So you can see, of course, just on the south edge of Monona is a large green blob, which is along the wetland area between the 2 lakes. Resource protection areas include bodies of water, wetlands, floodplains, shoreland, buffer strips, steep wooded slopes, and parkland. In already urbanized areas, these are known as environmental corridors. Current regulations prohibit development in these areas. Natural resources are also found in areas not legally protected from development, but that still provide important benefits to the region. These are called stewardship areas because preserving their benefits requires stewardship among landowners and communities. These areas include highly potentially restorable wetlands, which can reduce the risk of flooding and increase climate resiliency, high-quality woodlands that increase carbon sequestration and enhance quality of life, and lastly, the 500-year flood zone, which is also known, you can be considered as the 0.2% annual risk of flooding. That's the published numbers, but with climate change, as you know, the threat of increased risk of flooding has been going up. The final strategy is minimizing development of long-term farmland preservation areas, where and whenever possible, and coordinating development within farmland transition areas at the local level. Farmland preservation areas, shown here very generally, are the areas designated in town and county farmland preservation plans. These areas may include agricultural enterprise areas. They're typically characterized by sizable tracts of contiguous farmland and high-quality soils. They're generally outside of agricultural transition areas at the edge of cities and villages. The rationale behind this strategy is that by minimizing development in resource and farmland areas, and by focusing it instead along corridors and in centers, already developed areas and in planned business districts and neighborhoods, growth will be more efficient. From 1990 through 2015, the region converted an average of 4,745 acres of farm and open land to urban development every 5 years. The rate of urban development declined significantly in recent years, as you can see there, and as you can see in the green bars. The 2050 growth scenario continues this trend and converts a 5-year average of about 1,300 acres to urban development every 5 years. This number does not include other acres of farmland and open space converted for scattered rural development, which would be about 700 acres of farm and open land every 5 years. So, moving on, not too many more slides. So we're going to talk about how to make it happen. The growth scenario and strategies just described show what we can accomplish by working together to apply common regional development strategies in a coordinated effort. Local communities, private sector partners, and other regional entities are the others are the ones that can make this framework happen. Local government officials, that's you, and residents will play a primary role in implementation, particularly through updates to local comprehensive plans. When putting together plans and policies for future development, communities can apply the regional strategies and consider the 2050 growth scenario. Communities can also implement the framework by preparing more detailed area and neighborhood plans that reflect the neighborhood strategies. A third method could be through changes to zoning code. In addition, communities can learn from each other about how additional ways to implement the framework. The private sector is also key to implementing the regional development framework. Developers, builders, lenders, realtors together plan, finance, develop, build, and sell most new development. Of course, development must be viable in the marketplace or it can't contribute to regional goals. To make this happen, community members will need to work with private sector partners to apply strategies that both meet the goals and succeed in the market. I think that's, as a plan commission, what you kind of thing you basically do. CARPC can assist in several ways. We can help you with future development planning by facilitating dialogue and information, sharing across communities about successes and challenges in applying the strategies. We can provide advisory comments to communities working through the urban service area amendment process. And we will continue to track development data as moving forward and report on progress towards goals. Well, we can make big strides towards our shared goals through coordinated regional growth strategies. They are one piece of addressing our regional challenges. Physical development alone will not get us all the way to our shared goals. For example, the framework recommends expanding the range of housing types and choices, but other strategies are needed to ensure safe, decent, and affordable housing for all. Dane County's regional housing strategy, which will follow the development framework, will explore such strategies. Similarly, transportation is also critical to meeting the regional goals. In particular, the 2050 growth scenario, as I showed, will reduce average household greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, but the scenario still increases total greenhouse gas emissions. In other words, more households produce more total emissions, even when each individual household produces less. This falls short of Dane County's Climate Action Plan target, which calls for net zero carbon emissions from vehicles by 2050. A large part of that will be accomplished through vehicle electrification, running on electricity produced by renewable resources. But transportation infrastructure policies are also needed to close the gap. For example, with better options than driving alone, and the MPO's Regional Transportation Plan update, which is just got kicked off recently, will explore these options. In conclusion, the decisions we make today in the near term will shape our future in the long term. The Regional Development Framework supports our region's projected growth by highlighting available opportunities and mapping realistic planning concepts. So then that's concludes the presentation, and now we've gone through the overview. We return to the discussion questions. How does the framework compare to your community's future development plans, and what do you think is the best way to implement the plan? So so I'll throw it open, and of course you can just ask questions or respond to those comments. And thank you again for the technical challenges that I was going through up here. So.
Would any committee members like to dive in with questions or comments?
Yeah, I do. I have a challenge that's on my mind is, so Monona, we just released an RFP for our transit services. And we received 2 bids, and one that's the same exact, and keeping things the same as they are. And the other one is switching to electric vehicles and a very modern app that's much like Uber and Lyft and almost doing a hybrid of on-demand response. But that comes at a much higher cost. And so we, of course, want to do that, but you know, I don't know if you know of any other funding that might be available to help with that challenge, and how do we get there? Because our bid is for the next 5 years. And so, you know, we want to start making progress on reducing our carbon emissions, and our bus service would be a great place to start, but it is a little more costly for us, even though the hidden costs are great as well. So.
Right. And I don't have any magic, answer to give you. That is, one of the key challenges that face us, and unfortunately the costs of putting carbon into the atmosphere are not included in the cost, generally factored into the cost of, running our automobiles and buses. And so then you're trying to, compete with those costs not being included versus a higher cost of electrification. And, how to set up a funding structure that does reflect those environmental and social costs, I think is a challenge. And, I think higher levels of government really do have to step up, and I don't, maybe there will be some funding coming from the federal level to help assist with communities in the budget bills that are being, the infrastructure bill and the theoretical big one following, multi-trillion-dollar one following that in the U.S. Senate. So. That's not anything you can write down and go, take to the bank tomorrow, but those are just my general thoughts.
Patrick?
I mean, I think it's nice that we're thinking about electrification of vehicles, but I think the real solution is we need to be talking about transportation on a regional level, right? And cost sharing from the county and cost sharing from the state, and trying to figure out how to make that piece work, because regional transportation is the way that it should go at some point. So that's kind of how I feel about it. Yeah.
Right. And I noted the challenge that physical development alone can't solve these problems, but on the other hand, making those the regional transportation efficient and system work that allows better options to driving alone in a car.
Well,
making changes to the way we develop physically sort of is a required first step, a step towards getting that. I mean, if we develop the wrong way and we keep spreading out, or we spread out even more in ways that can't connect people with anything but driving alone, then that sort of precludes those options. So.
Well, for sure. Obviously, density needs to be increased. Density needs to be increased, and transportation needs to be addressed. Making sure that people in the community that don't have access to transportation can get to the services that they need, and those services are also available. So,
right.
It'll just be interesting to see how that discussion continues moving forward, and how we're going to address those things.
Right. And I encourage you to participate in the NPO's regional transportation plan update. What do they call it? Connect Madison 2050 or something like that. And they will be exploring those options. They're going to be running different what if scenarios, and that'd be a really good vehicle.
Well, we've kind of seen what happens when we expand on the periphery without adding services,
right.
And then we end up with the development that was near McFarland. It was the Owl Creek neighborhood.
Right.
So it was isolated and developed a lot of issues that could have been prevented with better planning.
Correct.
And that's the kind of thing that it needs to be, that I think you're doing. So,
Thank you.
Chris?
A couple questions, a couple things you said that hit me. So our development is around 1,300 acres of farmland you're looking at in a 5-year period for urban development?
In this 2050 scenario.
Right. Yeah, I was really struck by the number of 700 acres in rural development. I thought we discourage rural development as taking half the acreage is being picked up on sewer, septic system and wells. That surprises me.
That even though it's it's less than 10% of all the households.
But it's taking half the land.
But it's the average rural lot, is 5 times as big. Yeah.
It seems to me that would be one place to be looking at, because I was shocked when I heard that 10% of land, 50% of land, a third of the land is for 10% of the units.
Right.
Because it's half the size. So that's one thing. And then the other thing you mentioned, protecting the 500-year flood zone. I wasn't aware that there was a 500-year flood map.
Yeah, there is, and if you go on the CARPC's website, we have a data portal, and it shows the map that I showed you. In fact, showed both of what we call the natural resource protection areas, which are the legally protected areas, and those stewardship areas. So those are we've mapped those.
So you've mapped all of Dane County?
Yeah.
Wow. I wasn't aware. Because our flood maps are 100-year.
It's not. We didn't map. The map that's on the online portal is a combination of those flood zones, the potentially restorable wetlands, and then the other one. There were 3 categories.
So it's like more of an estimation of a 500-year flood elevation?
Well, it's combining 3 factors into a single layer. So the 500-year flood is within that, is one of the components that define that layer.
But it's not mapped like our 100-year flood zone is very accurately mapped. We don't have that in a 500-year, do we?
I'd have to, actually, that's not my area of
Okay,
expertise.
I'm not aware that we
But I
did.
could-
That would be quite a hydrological feat
Yeah,
to do that.
so I'd have to check with
Okay.
the engineers and mappers
Okay.
and put that together.
And then just a couple comments. Good presentation. We're mostly doing what you want done. Obviously, you said that in the beginning here. We're a community that's redeveloping. That's all we have. We're landlocked. So a lot of what we do is trying to find the best uses for our land. And I would say when we're looking at your recommendations, you're dominated by Madison. That's clear, right? MPO is dominated by the Madison area, and that doesn't always blend well with what's best for Monona. And we're here to take those recommendations, but to really see what meets for our community. For example, housing I'll use. When we looked at it a few years ago, we were pretty close to 50% rental here, and with the apartments we've added, I'm sure we're well above it, which is something we'll look at with our comprehensive plan. And we're on the really high end of small communities. We're approaching, we're Fitchburg and Sun Prairie and Madison levels. So it's something we have to look at for how it fits in our community. And I'm not sure, what your recommendations are going to be, but it's something that we have to blend with what works for Monona.
Right.
This is what I'm saying. Because when you're saying how do we adopt these, I'm not sure we would adopt them. I think we'd use them as recommendations as we go through our new comprehensive plan, which I think is, another 4 years we have to do that again?
Yes.
And that's an arduous process. That's a lot. So all the data you could give us before then, I know you're collecting data, and that's really helpful. And the more data we can get from RPC, the better as far as all the factors go. That's really helpful for us when we have to write a plan.
We'd be happy to help you in any way we can with that data.
I think we'd really appreciate the data. It's hard for us. You're looking at both our staff members.
Right. And we're not asking you to adopt this.
I
We're just
understand
asking you
those
to use it as a guide.
But your question was, how do we get so where we adopt or take all your recommendations? I think we have to sift and winnow through them to see what fits for Monona. Because
Exactly.
we're very unique. We have nowhere to go but redevelopment.
Right.
So we're very protective, I think, of our redevelopment areas, I would say, in general. We want to see the perfect thing for us going there best we can.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell that in the Q&A earlier on the previous agenda item.
Well,
Right?
and that previous agenda, it was increasing density. We just have to make sure it works for that corner.
Exactly.
And
right.
we have very unique little areas here in town. So
Yeah.
appreciate all the info, though. It's good. The more info you can throw our way, the better.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Appreciate that as a
Just
resource.
one comment is that our Carpses region is bigger than the MPO, so that
Understood,
Yeah.
but it's dominated by Madison.
I don't know what you mean by that, but
Um,
I mean, policy-wise, I don't think Madison dominates our, what
Oh.
we.
I kind of thought it did.
Okay. No, I don't. I would have
Okay.
to beg to differ.
How many does Madison appoint?
Madison appoints 4 out of the 13.
Okay, and then how many does Dane County appoint?
3.
3, okay.
Yeah. And cities and villages appoint
Mhm.
3, and towns appoint 3. So
Yeah.
I tried to, strike a balance based on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Brian? Corinne? Do you
Yeah,
have
I
anything you'd
can-
like to say?
I echo some of the comments that have already been stated. I had a little computer glitch. I think Patrick covered the whole issue regarding regional transit issues and the importance of a city the size of Monona. We can't get a fair shake when it comes to trying to dovetail with Metro, and that can't be addressed by a city by city trying to play with a big beast that wants to overcharge for a product because there's not a lot of new access that they want to come here and make a stop for, but we definitely need it for people to be able to access other locations. So it really does need to be a regional or county solution versus each small city trying to play with the big boys.
Corinne?
I agree with that. you mentioned it in your presentation as well. You said at the end, housing and transportation are keys, and it's absolutely, I wholeheartedly agree with that, because if you don't have the transportation options available, it affects how you develop that area as well. So I think that process, that planning process for looking at this regional transportation is going to be critical. And I'm wondering where the urgency is, or if there is going to be some increased urgency. 2050, I know planning needs to happen. You need to be thinking into the future. But if you think about all of the different, commitments to moving toward different solutions and moving to electric cars and reducing greenhouse gases, and thinking about the report that we're going to be all hearing about soon here, I think there is more urgency now when it comes to climate change, and transportation is a key to that, and housing is a key to that. So that was what I was thinking as you were talking through that. I also, I don't know if I misheard your comment. So I guess a question I had, point of clarification, you talked about how one of your strategies, it's a 42% new home in a vibrant center. So 4 and 10 is happening in a vibrant center already, but the other 6 are happening on those fringe areas or in the rural areas.
So the 42% was the amount, the percentage of the projected future growth in terms of households that would occur within what we've identified as centers or along corridors. A lot of the employment, for example, occurs in more of employment districts, which don't quite fit the category of our definition of centers. And you have another portion of households occurring in planned, hopefully according to the strategies, in planned traditional neighborhood developments, more along as I described in the presentation, and a smaller percentage than in the past occurring in single family large lot subdivisions. One thing that I think it is important to point out, and because you make an excellent point, is when we mapped out the future growth for 30 years, the first half of that, so 15 years of growth, is already largely prescribed. It's already there's plans in place, there's development projects working through the pipeline. You have subdivisions platted, in Wanakee and Sun Prairie and Verona and on that are those are going to almost assuredly going to happen because they're already going through the pipeline. So where we really had more latitude to start promoting these strategies more aggressively was really the latter half. And that sort of, it does beg the question of your sense of urgency, because that is absolutely true. Just because we're looking at 30 years worth of growth, we want to look at that because you want to see the big picture, but the urgency is now to start applying these strategies and in terms of physical development and other strategies in terms of transportation and housing, as soon as immediately, really. So that's definitely the case.
I guess the other thoughts that I had was, you said you did the survey in 2018, and I was just thinking about how things can change in 3 years. In 2018 with the flooding, and then we're in a drought, and then we had COVID. We have COVID. I'm sitting at home. So it's all of that is just so hard to plan for. But I'm hoping that the RPC and the cities and villages and everyone is thinking about how to take these recommendations and think about them in the context of today as well. And
I hope so, because continuing as just, on and on as we've always done, is not really an option if we're going to meet our climate goals.
Mm-hmm. Did you meet with Dane County Land and Water Department at all as you were mapping out your protected areas and sensitive areas, or whatever the lighter green color?
Yeah, the lighter green color. When we mapped out those areas, we didn't map out those areas specifically for this regional development framework. They were mapped out as part of CARPC's overall environmental resources planning, and the staff in CARPC that do that do work closely with staff at Dane County,
okay,
Lakes and Watershed, and we partner closely with a lot of state and local organizations and entities working on water quality and water flood resilience issues, like the Clean Lakes Alliance and others.
Yeah, I know you're part of Yahara Clean. I know you're there. So
Right.
I just was curious because I know that they're doing some other mapping as well, where they're just doing some different analyses using some different factors that might be useful to the other communities as well as they're thinking about planning.
Okay, thank you. That would be helpful.
That's it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I would just add, I think, as Chris said, that Monona's plans parallel this in many respects. The current the comprehensive plan. I think like, as has already been mentioned, I think we have a major problem with transit. And I think we also need to work harder at diversifying our housing. I think it's not just, as Chris indicated, it's not just a matter of ownership versus renters, but rather a whole diversity, including addressing the missing metal. And again, that's spoken to in our comprehensive plan, but we're not there yet. And I think we need to grapple with some zoning issues and some other issues to make sure that diversity is there, including, of course, affordable housing. And then the other thing I would say is that I am concerned, and I guess this is where I put on my conservation hat, because that's what I do for my day job. I am concerned about the overall level of development versus conservation areas. I'm just remembering back to the floods that we had in 2018 and all the presentations that were done then, at looking at the challenges in our areas and the growth that Madison had already experienced in the last 30 or 40 years, and the massive amount of roads and concrete as a result, and their contribution, of course. And I know that we're doing a lot on the stormwater front and a whole bunch of other things to try to address that, but I just, I worry that it's not enough, that, we won't be a Houston, we won't be a concrete parking lot, but that we're not giving what is inevitable in terms of the increased volume of water that we're going to be seeing, that there's just not going to be enough, saturation, and that our lakes will continue to suffer because of not having enough of that conservation.
Yeah, and of course we share those concerns, and I think your observations are correct. As you probably are aware, that the city of Madison recently adopted more stringent stormwater standards, including for infill and redevelopment. So I would encourage, if you haven't already, to look at those and consider something like that for Monona. And Dane County is actually going through the process of looking at those standards too. So maybe if they did that, that would apply to Monona.
Once they adopt that, then we'll have to.
Yeah. Right. So,
right. But they're looking at Madison standards, tweaking them a little bit, and then that'll be adopted, I think, fairly shortly.
Yeah, I think it's well down the trajectory. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's at least, and a step, and it's an important step because the so up until that Madison adopted that, and redevelopment really sort of got a pass in terms of stormwater standards. But if you're going to focus more of your development in already existing developed areas, then that's going to become increasingly important, and it's something that we have to look at to address the increased risk of flooding, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Is it enough? I think we'll one step at a time. Hopefully, it'll make a significant difference, and people, I'm sure, entities will be tracking that and monitoring that pretty carefully.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, we thank you very much for coming. Unless anybody has anything else to. Susan, any thoughts, questions?
I think you've covered a lot of it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate everything CARPC does. With that, we will move to number 7, reports of staff and commission members. Staff report.
Thank you. So as way of economic development update and potential upcoming items, the main one here moving forward is the zoning permit that accompanies the CSM request that we heard earlier tonight, 6501 Venona Drive. Those materials have been submitted, and I'm expecting those to be on the August 23rd meeting agenda. Sorry. Also, the Menards, the bridge that was part of that project that was approved last month, or the expansion that was approved last month, the bridge was separate. That is now moving through the process as well. It's a lot of engineering review. I'm expecting most likely that comes through for one meeting, one Plan Commission meeting, but there would be Via Becker review. There'll be DNR approvals needed as well as CARPC.
For the bridge?
For the second bridge in Menards crossing the...
That's the whole reason they put a bridge in, so they didn't need DNR approvals. That was the last time they did it. I remember they were having difficulties, so they went with a bridge because then they're out of the DNR's area of jurisdiction.
I think once we have specifics, we can confirm that.
Yeah.
As the checklist goes, DNR was included, but they may be exempt, maybe depending on final.
I think that's their reason for a bridge. Bridges aren't cheap.
Yes. So I'm expecting that one, Darren at Via Becker is going to be looking into that. I'm expecting that in September for Plan Commission review. If I may, at this point, also ask for kind of commission feedback, both in person and on the line, for Zoom versus in person for future meetings. If I could just take a pulse. It may become policy citywide at some point soon, whether it goes back to Zoom or not, but just be interested to hear from the Commission. Feedback on tonight versus maybe going back to a full Zoom or to hybrid, somewhere in between.
Anybody?
I'm okay with hybrid.
Chris?
I like being in person. I thought this would be a disaster tonight, but actually Will's tech was pretty good, and I mean, we can hear the people on Zoom quite well. We get to see them. I'm actually impressed with how well this went tonight. I was expecting much less.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome a lot.
That was compliments, Will.
Maybe more work for Will. But
I prefer being in
it is
person
more
too.
work for Will, I'm sure. I don't feel as strongly one way or the other. I think, if we have, it's nice to at least have the hybrid, so that if we have people who have to travel to come, they don't have to necessarily do that. They could be on Zoom as well. I'm okay either way.
Okay. Chrissy?
Yeah, I appreciate having the option of the hybrid, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I like the hybrid as well. It worked better than I thought. Except for the fact that we're obviously all out of practice from being in person, because Will had to run out here to adjust the mics for all of us all night to remind us that we needed a mic in front of us. But otherwise, I think the Zoom has worked better, and now that you, Corinne and Brian, that you guys are actually on the screen as opposed to across the room, the size of a postage stamp, that helps too. But
Yeah, I think that made a difference for me when I, you know, it's because it was, you could always hear them well, so.
Yes, yeah. Makes a difference. Okay, does that help?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Can I ask a question on your one item?
Yeah.
We need a recommendation from Public Works before we make a recommendation to council, and you're saying we're going to see this in 2 weeks. Public Works isn't meeting till,
No, I'm sorry. The zoning permit will be coming through in 2 weeks for the construction, for the pre-hearing. So I think.
for that same project.
Correct.
All right,
But the
okay,
CSM
but not the
will be-
CSM.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Great.
And I think there was some feedback was already received, so I'll certainly speak to the applicants as to whether they choose to revise materials in the meantime.
Yeah, because if they submitted already, then all the comments from tonight will be.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anything else on economic development or upcoming items?
So we did meet, the city administrator and I did meet with the applicant working on the Monona Garden site again. Discussed a few more of the TIF elements to the project, but in doing so, I think gave a little bit more clarity as to next steps for the project as it relates to the Plan Commission review as well. So I'm expecting with that, most likely sometime in September. Again, it may be pre-hearing in format, but leading into more of a formal consideration as it relates to parking. There've been quite a few sort of internal discussions as it relates to that. So I think finalizing certainly the ground floor program of the building, the parking, and how that shakes out as it relates to the TIF as well. I expect that will come back in September as well for Plan Commission.
And then, anything else on the other Monona Drive project that we got to figure out?
The BMO project?
Yeah.
I have not heard from them recently. I believe we had a debrief with them and we left it would be late September, so maybe late September or October. They were planning to take the designs quite a lot further based upon feedback, and I think thinking about things like the setbacks, the stormwater, taking some of those things quite a bit further such that they can really draw it out and see how the site layout really works.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, great. Updates on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts?
Nothing from myself. I believe there was discussion of this at the last meeting about the Nehemiah update and things, so I don't know if
Yeah,
You
you mean
both-
the committee that met?
the committee, but also the recommendations. I think, given it was the first time it was on the agenda, I think there had been some commission requests of the report that was published and things as well.
Yeah, I think, did everyone on this committee see that Nehemiah report, that initial analysis? That's something we should disseminate.
Yes, I can share that.
Great, thanks. I think that came out, is that July? Well, June maybe even June?
June,
Something like that. Yeah, it's a good information, kind of a broad assessment of where we're at. The ad hoc DEI committee did just meet, and it was basically an introductory session. So not really anything to report other than really cool group of people. Really broad and diverse group. So really cool to see. I think people seem really positive and excited about the work. And then I believe our next meeting is scheduled for August 18. It's a Thursday.
Thank you. Upcoming meetings?
So it looks like we will have a meeting on the 23rd. That the 6501 Monona Drive is the only application I have at this point. So I'll update the commission as to their wishes with the zoning permit if they choose to update. I'm going to be out next week, so that may impact availability and if it needs to push to the 13th. If they proceed with what they have, we can probably still accommodate it. If plans need to be submitted later in the week, it may be a little too close. But I will keep the commission updated.
Safe and wonderful travels. It's been a while for you.
Thank you.
I'm happy that you can go see your family. So,
Thank
any Plan Commission requests for information? No? Do I have Motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Second?
Second.
We have a second from Susan. All those in favor say aye.
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 Great, we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Right.